These billionaires live like average Joes. From simply living like the rest of us to choosing to be insanely cheap, these billionaires prove you don't need to live a lavish lifestyle just because you got tons of cash. The famous names on this list are guaranteed to shock you. Number 15. John Caldwell, $3 billion. John Caldwell built a cell phone retailing empire in Britain called Phones for You. It's not operating anymore, but that seems to have made no difference to John's life. And not just because he's got investments in other industries from real estate to fashion. This self-made billionaire continued to live life the same way he always did after making billions. That includes buying clothes off the rack, cycling to work, and, weirdly, cutting his own hair. For the record, we don't recommend that last one unless you're literally choosing between a haircut and buying food. Also, we should mention that he bought a Bentley and still cycled to work after. He's definitely not the average billionaire. But at least Caldwell bought the Bentley. That's a far more expensive purchase than the next person on our list would dream of making. Number 14. Charles Ergen, $2 billion. Charles Ergen started out selling satellite dishes out of the back of his truck. Soon, he transformed that into Dish Network, a multi-billion-dollar company. His wealth has plummeted in recent years, but he's still worth an impressive $2 billion. But even when he was at the height of his wealth, he didn't exactly behave the way you expect from billionaires. Instead of stepping out of the office to enjoy lunch at a fancy restaurant, he would bring packed lunches in. They normally consisted of just a sandwich and Gatorade, in case you were wondering. Also, he would share hotel rooms with other company members on business trips until just a few years ago. There were no penthouse suites for this billionaire, not even back when he was worth more than $18 billion. Maybe he should have enjoyed it while he had it. Then again, at least he tried to hang on to his billions even if it didn't work. The next person was frugal for a very different reason than anyone else on this list. Number 13. Chuck Feeney, $1.5 million. Hang on. Why are we putting someone worth only $1.5 million in the middle of a list full of billionaires? Well, Chuck Feeney was a billionaire. In fact, he had a $7.5 billion fortune. He earned that huge sum of cash by co-founding the duty-free shoppers group. Yep, he literally invented duty-free. So where did it all go? Well, he had a pretty unique approach to being frugal. By that we mean he gave away all his money. Yes, all of it. Well, except for the 1.5 mil he still has left. He's literally on a quest to give away all his millions before he kicks the bucket. He calls it giving while living. He was always frugal and was known for traveling by coach and carrying his books and documents in a plastic shopping bag. At some point, he must have decided that his cash could be put to better use if he gave it away to someone who could use it rather than just leaving it to pile up in a bank. He is now considered the most generous philanthropist ever. We can't help but wonder what the world would be like if all billionaires had the same idea as Chuck. Chuck has got to be the most generous billionaire out there. That means the next rich man on our list is almost his exact opposite. You'll see why we think that. Number 12. Azim Premji, $11.5 billion. Indian businessman Azim Premji made his fortune as the chairman of IT company Wipro Limited. But after making $11.5 billion, it seems he's more interested in less tech-driven matters. According to anonymous reports, he personally keeps count of how many rolls of toilet paper his employees use while at work. Sure, he's known for being frugal in his personal life, but a toilet paper obsession doesn't seem very healthy, does it? Counting toilet paper can't be a good use of your time. At least the next billionaire on our list took up the simple life for a very good reason. Number 11. Christy Walton, $11.5 billion. Christy Walton married into the Walmart family and into their wealth. But while some people only marry billionaires for the lavish lifestyle, Christy took a different approach. When she had her son, she decided she wanted to raise him like any other child. So she kept him far away from the press and raised him in an ordinary old house in California. With his lifestyle, he never would have known his parents were billionaires if they'd never told him. She donated the house a couple of years ago now that her son is older. We're sure that was the right choice. After all, kids who grow up rich are known for becoming spoiled brats. The next billionaire also made a good choice, before he made some bad ones. Number 10. David Cheriton, $11.6 billion. David Cheriton was a professor at Stanford before he made the best decision ever. He invested $100,000 in a brand new company called Google. We all know what happened next. Today, that $100,000 he invested has grown to $11.6 billion. But he's not exactly taken advantage of all that cash. He still lives in the same house he lived in before his genius investment. And he cuts his own hair, which still hasn't gotten any more normal even though we've heard about more billionaires doing it. Saving a few dollars on a haircut doesn't seem wise. The next person on our list is also interested in saving a few dollars, but he has a much better way of doing it. Number 9. David Green, $15.4 billion. How much cash do you need before you can start flying in first class? Sometimes it feels like millions. But David Green, the founder of Hobby Lobby, has an impressive $15.4 billion, and he still doesn't buy first-class tickets. In fact, he doesn't even fly in business class. While most billionaires are seeing the world in private jets, in fact, Jeff Bezos owns 2 of them, David Green is flying commercial. You might even spot him in coach if you're lucky. But if he's not handing over money for a better seat, there's no way he's giving you any. We can understand not wanting to pay crazy prices for first class, but the next billionaire saved money on something much weirder. Number 8. Carl Albrecht, $25 billion. You'll hear a lot of weird things billionaires do to avoid spending money before this list is over, but this might be the weirdest one of all. Co-founder of the budget supermarket chain Aldi is currently worth an incredible $25 billion. The other co-founder of the company was Carl's brother, Theo, but he almost didn't live to see just how big his company would become. In 1971, Theo was kidnapped and held for ransom in what became one of Germany's most high-profile crimes ever. But instead of panicking, Theo decided he needed to do something to hang on to his cash. He successfully negotiated a ransom on a budget, paying only the equivalent of $2 million, which was way less than he was asked for and could have been pretty dangerous for his brother. Then, to top that off, he deducted the ransom as a business expense. Would you gamble with your sibling's life to save a few $1 million? We think we would have handed over the money if we were that wealthy. But the next person on our list probably would have done the same thing Carl did, because he also takes saving money to the extreme. Number 7. Ingvar Kamprad, $58.7 billion. Ingvar Kamprad made his fortune by starting IKEA at the age of just 17. But that must be the age he's still at in his head, because he's as tight-fisted with his money as your average penniless student. He's well known for staying at budget hotels, flying in economy class, and using the subway. He does have a car, but it's a pretty old Volvo. No flashy sports cars like you see other billionaires driving. Sometimes he doesn't even use the Volvo. He's been spotted taking the bus to work and back on more than one occasion. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. According to one documentary, he only buys his clothes from flea markets. He even waits until he's visiting an underdeveloped country to have his hair cut, because they charge less. He won't take anything from a minibar in a hotel. And he's even been known to steal salt and pepper packets from restaurants. Plus, he recycles tea bags, which is pretty much the dictionary definition of penny pinching. Think that's a weird thing to do as a billionaire? Well, just after the holidays, you should keep an eye out. You'll probably spot him buying presents at the post-Christmas sales. And no, that's not a joke. Think it's weird seeing a billionaire on a public bus? Well, the next billionaire on our list can also be found in a pretty surprising place. Number 6. Amancio Ortega, $88.9 billion. Spanish billionaire Amancio Ortega is the world's richest retailer, thanks to his Inditex fashion group. You might not recognize that name, but you will definitely know the name Zara. which is one of the fashion chains produced by the group that Ortega founded. But despite being the wealthiest man in Europe, Ortega can be surprisingly tight-fisted. Back in 2016, he overtook Bill Gates to become the world's richest person for a few months. That was when the press started revealing stories about how he eats in the staff cafeteria at work and wears the same blazer and shirt every day, even though he could afford the finest suits in the world. Also, even though he could buy a mansion with a view in any city in the world, he chooses to live in an apartment block like the rest of us. He's not the only billionaire who seems to have an unusual view of buying property. Just ask number 5, Carlos Slim Helú, $92.4 billion. For 2 years, Carlos Slim Helú was the richest person in the world. That's not true anymore, but the conglomerate billionaire still has a whopping $92.4 billion. But he doesn't seem to enjoy spending loads of cash. He doesn't have a private jet or a Ferrari. He owned an old Mercedes, which he used to drive himself to work in. He also lived in the same 6-bedroom house for 40 years. Considering most billionaires buy more houses than chocolate bars, that's pretty surprising. So everyone was pretty shocked when he handed over $80 million for a house in Manhattan a few years ago. But he almost immediately tried to sell it again. It was almost like he realized he'd spent some cash and totally panicked. We don't know why. That house wasn't even worth 1% of his wealth. Now, the next billionaire on our list has reached the $100 billion mark. But he's even more determined to not spend his cash. Number 4, Stephen Ballmer, $100 billion. The longtime Microsoft CEO was the 30th employee that the major company ever hired. But just because he's in tech, that doesn't mean he likes to hand over money for shiny new gadgets. Apparently, his car of choice is a Ford Fusion Hybrid, which sells for about $30,000 today. It was delivered personally by Ford's CEO, but that doesn't really match up to having a Ferrari in the drive, does it? Sure, a billionaire buying a Ford is kind of unexpected, but it doesn't come close to the weirdness of the next famous rich person on our list. Number 3, Mark Zuckerberg, $106 billion. It'll come as no surprise to see Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg on this list. Since the first day he got rich, he's been on a mission to present himself as an everyman and totally ignore his ginormous bank balance. We all know he loves showing up in a basic gray tee, a hoodie, and jeans instead of wearing fancy suits like most billionaires. But that's not the only way he saves money. In 2014, it was reported that he drives a Volkswagen Golf GTI. The 2017 model sells for about $25,815. That's all fine. After all, who are we to tell him how to live? But all the reports of him refusing to tip waiters doesn't sit well. Surely, with billions in the bank, you can share a little? The money has clearly gone to Mark Zuckerberg's head, even if it's showing in a pretty weird way. The next super famous billionaire on our list seems genuinely down to earth, which might explain why he is no good at spending money. Number 2, Bill Gates, $111.2 billion. Bill Gates became one of the most famous rich people on Earth when he founded Microsoft. Today, he's estimated to be worth a shocking $111.2 billion. But he doesn't act like it. He's shown up to high-profile events wearing a $10 watch, and for a long time, he was known for flying coach, which, in his defense, was company policy. But someone obviously told Bill that the policy probably doesn't apply to him because he does have his own plane now. But he hasn't totally given up on living like an ordinary person. He claims he still likes to wash dishes. I don't know about you, but one of the reasons I want to be a billionaire is so I never have to wash dishes again. Think all the billionaires on this list are weird about money? Well, the last person on our list has way more money than all of them, but he's also the one who's least likely to spend it on anything. In fact, he's known for living like he's literally poor. But who is it? Number 1, Warren Buffett, $120.8 billion. Warren Buffett is the king of pretending to be poor. Strap in. In 1958, Buffett bought a house in Omaha, Nebraska for $31,500. It's worth about $250,000 in today's money. But even though he's currently worth over $120 billion, he still lives there. He only drives used cars, especially ones that he bought cheap, because they've been damaged in hailstorms and other weird things like that. It looks like he's currently driving around in a 2014 Cadillac XTS, which he's had since 2015. He used an old Nokia until 2019. He's obsessed with clipping coupons, and he actually does use them. He once treated Bill Gates to lunch at McDonald's, which he paid for with coupons. Oh, and speaking of McDonald's, Bill Gates claims that Buffett mainly lives on a diet of burgers, ice cream, and Diet Coke. And the reason isn't just that he's trying to save money. He says he checked which age group has the lowest death rates, and according to his research, it's 6-year-olds that are most likely to live to see another day. So, because 6-year-olds are least likely to die, he figures he should eat like them to stay healthy. I mean, it sounds like he just wants an excuse to eat McDonald's every day. I guess those Michelin-starred restaurants just aren't his cup of tea. But if you think all that's a little weird, he took it one step further when he was expecting his first child. Instead of handing over cash to buy a bed for the baby, he chose to store his child in a dresser drawer. Yes, you heard that right. He literally stored his real-life baby in a dresser. Sure, he pulled the drawer out before he put the baby in there. He didn't keep it hidden. But still, he was worth billions of dollars. Isn't a nice nursery for the baby a reasonable expense? We'll leave it to you to decide. Think it's weird that billionaires don't want to spend all that money? Well, sometimes spending loads of money is pretty weird too. To discover who the opposite of these billionaires are, we need to step into the world of rap. They famously love flashing their cash, but that means they sometimes throw money at some pretty insane stuff. Check out this list of the most ridiculous purchases ever made by rappers.